Everybody needs to keep up with technology in order to remain competitive.
Most people, they don't like change.
And in business, it's really easy to try and ask people to leave the personal and the emotional at home, and it never happens.
The guys I've spoken to, the team, they all have the North Star. They're all on the same page. They all get it. And that's what makes it successful.
If your ERP implementation horror story was a movie, what would the title be?
Mission Impossible.
Hello, welcome to the Sayva Spotlight Tech Update. Today we're here with Jared Sanderson, VP of Client Solutions and Managing Director of Sayva Technology. And we also have a special guest, DJ Weed, a digital transformation leader with expertise in technology, communication, and change management. Thank you for both joining today.
No problem. Happy to be here.
Great to be
here. All
here.
right. So today we're going to be talking about ERP implementations and change management. But first, Jared, could you give us a market update to catch us up from when we spoke last in the first quarter?
Currently has been fairly flat, up a couple hundred, up a couple 100,000, just over 200,000 last month. Unemployment, though, slightly ticking upward, just about 4%. But again, no huge upswings or downswings. Within the software development market, there is still some people sitting on the sidelines from some of the layoffs and some of the transition from, fully remote workplace to some positive trends. I think a lot of the layoffs have stopped. We're not seeing the huge big changes and swings that we were seeing over the last about year and a half. So keeping relatively flat and looking for a more positive outlook going into 2025.
And are you still viewing this as a candidates market or an employer market?
It's definitely moved in the last year or two, more of an employer's market. However, it really depends on the industry field and how much flexibility that employer has as to where they hire and the cost of living, locations they can access. So if they are looking for someone to come on site, it is a bit more of a tighter pool as they're trying to create that culture and internal team that they had pre-COVID, just with that collaboration.
Sure, if you're in the AI space, probably a good time to be a software developer.
Yeah, there's a lot of cloud and AI and just modernization projects to get the data clean and ready for the AI projects, which a lot of large enterprise companies are looking to take advantage of AI at scale. However, there's just a lot of legacy applications and data that needs to be cleaned up before they can really monetize or maximize the potential of AI capabilities.
All right, well, great update. So let's hop into our topic today. So ERP implementations and change management. We've talked about organizational change management, on past podcasts. However, we want to dive deeper with a subject matter expert. So that's why we have DJ here. And DJ's been involved with dozens of implementations and can bring a unique lens to what success looks like, how to avoid pitfalls, having fun and collaborating, and influencing for positive change. So DJ, let's start with just a little bit of background on you. How'd you get into this space? You came from a career serving our country in the Air Force to then getting into ERP implementations and change management. How did that all come together?
It's a good question. I did start in the Air Force as a public affairs officer. So it's basically doing PR for the military. And so I did a lot of communication, a lot of challenging situations that way, dealing with complex initiatives and complicated topics. And when I left the Air Force and active duty, I ended up falling into a technology-based nonprofit organization. And from there, my journey in technology sort of started. I found I had a real knack for technology. And I also discovered that some of the worst communicators I'd ever met were in the technology arena. They speak a completely different language, if you haven't already noticed. So my background in communication really came in handy, being sort of a digital translator. And that ability to translate tech talk into natural language and business speak into technology requirements really lent myself toward a path that has taken me down a lot of digital transformation initiatives, because most people don't have somebody who can really bridge that gap effectively. And that's where my expertise has really kind of found its niche.
Amazing. Great answer. Yeah, we've definitely seen that in the tech industry. Sometimes there's just a disconnect between the folks in management. Yes.
Oftentimes.
Absolutely. What's been your role during ERP projects, over the course of your career?
I've actually had a lot of different roles. Obviously, starting off with communications around them. So, writing up the messaging and helping with the general announcements and things like that. And then from there, I've moved into project management and then change management. And I actually even did couple of years as a service delivery person. I was the director of client services for a professional services company that actually deployed small to mid-size ERP solutions to customers. So I've been on both sides actually.
Yeah, and I'd have to imagine that seeing all angles of this, kind of helps you quite a bit, for depending on what situation you walk into.
100%. I mean, the ability to put yourself in other people's shoes when you're talking to them, to be able to understand where they're coming from with their concerns and with their needs and their questions and their desires and their demands can really be very beneficial. So I can see it from multiple perspectives. And then again, that translation piece comes into play all the time, where I'm like, okay, now I see where you're coming from. Let me translate that into some language that means something to the people who can actually help make what your needs are a reality.
Yeah, absolutely. Even on the smaller business side in our managed services departments, we have clients that, get to the point where they need to, transition out of like QuickBooks, let's say, to a NetSuite or something of that sort. And you have just various stakeholders. You have the accounting department who's doing work. You have the implementation team. You have the leadership team that just wants things done, but really a part of it. And it just it's definitely a lot of alignment.
It is. It definitely is a lot of alignment, and there can be a lot of opportunity for misunderstanding and miscommunication. More often than not, the issues that arise come from a miscommunication. It's not that people had a bad intention. It wasn't they were being malicious. They get categorized or kind of painted that way because of the way that people perceive it. But it really ends up coming down to just they were speaking about the same thing from two different ways and coming from two different places and talking past each other and not listening to each other. So yeah.
Okay, great. So, change management, it's obviously essential for any transition, but most people, they don't like change. So, when you're going into this right at the beginning saying, hey, we're going to switch ERPs or we're going to change, some sort of application, what's your mindset going into that? Because you know that you're going to get some resistance. So, what's your default starting point, and what's, some of the funny excuses you've heard, of people trying to, avoid change management?
I would say my main going in position is everybody's a person first. And in business, it's really easy to try and ask people to leave the personal and the emotional at home, and it never happens. So coming into it, accepting that, yeah, most people don't like change, and change is very difficult because it exposes areas of vulnerability and insecurity, and it requires them to take time out of the things that they know they're really good at, that give them a sense of positive self-esteem, to have to learn new things and go into an area where they're not so good. And people don't like to look bad at work. They don't like to look incompetent or like they don't know what they're doing. And so all of these types of transformations actually require people to go into that zone. So going in there and approaching it as, hey, you're a person and I know where you're coming from. So why don't we just talk about it? Sometimes the best thing people need is just someone to talk to and vent to. And then they get it off their chest and they're like, all right, fine, we'll move on. And half the time, they don't even need to act. They don't have a problem that needs to be solved. They just need someone who will listen and to make them feel like it's okay to be where they are and to be processing the change at whatever stage in the change they may be. So
Yeah.
I've had a lot of success doing that.
Yeah. It seems like, that really removes the tension and, those feelings that people have when they think, their whole job or, well-being is going to be overhauled.
Absolutely. I mean, when you make it okay for them to have those feelings, then all of a sudden they're like, "Oh, okay, cool." And some of that stress just disappears. And some of the tension and the kind of obstacles and barriers that people put up just kind of start to come down. But, there's always going to be some people who doesn't matter what you do, they're just like, I'm not doing this. And you asked about a funny story. I do recall having a conversation with somebody once who was not engaging on the project at all, despite their role having been kind of intrinsic to the project. Like, what is going on? Why are you not getting involved? And they said, why should I? We're just going to start all over again as soon as we go live and realize we didn't do it right. you know? There's a number of people who share that sentiment sometimes, where maybe they've been through this once, twice, three times sometimes at the same company within the span of a not too long period of time. And they're like, I just can't get my give a crap level up enough because I've been here, I've done this, I've seen this, and it fails every time. So
Yeah.
that I think is even more challenging than the normal kind of change curve that people traverse as you're going through these types of things. When they have baggage that they're bringing in, where they've seen this thing happen or been, it's been tried a couple of times before and it hasn't been successful. That's way harder, especially if leadership hasn't changed, if the goal hasn't changed, if if the environment and the culture haven't changed. They've got a pretty good argument for maybe you're not going to actually have the success that you think you're going to have. And my job at that point is then to start shifting my focus to the rest of the leadership team and the rest of the initiative to say, hey, where are we likely to fall down? And how can I help with shaping the organization to accept the change?
ERP projects have, they've had a lot of twists and turns and ups and downs, and there's always an expectation. You come in clear-headed of saying, okay, we want to do this, and here's why, right? There's a reason why companies implementing a new system, because maybe they won't have, there's legacy support that's not going to be, or support that's not going to be happening in the old system. It's being shelved. And so they have to make the change. It's not they want to, or maybe they want to get some new capabilities, reporting, what have you, as the company grows and evolves. From throwing things off track, from a go live to, hey, we want to start January 1st. This is just the ideal date, to changing the date. What do you think has been in all your ERP projects the thing that's thrown and kind of thrown that like ideal timeline off track? Has it been the implementation partner, the business, leadership not making the decision? What themes have you seen that might help some of the listeners say, okay, let's see if we can identify these to put, a bit more of a buffer, or ask some different questions to help us, be a bit more effective in future implementations?
Yeah, that's fair. I mean, I've seen all of it, to be perfectly honest. I mean, you can go out and you can Google reasons ERP implementations fail, and you'll get a whole litany of things. And I've seen them all. And to be perfectly honest, most initiatives suffer from at least a couple of those things. Leadership, not being engaged, they're being over engaged, finding yourself with just bad requirements gathering, or not having enough resources, or competing priorities, or lack of accountability. You name it. There are 100 different reasons why they fail. I would say, though, that the one thing that I've seen undermine implementations more than anything else is not having a really clear understanding of what you're trying to accomplish, that they want to do this. Maybe it's market pressure, maybe it's scalability, maybe it's growth, maybe it's just, as you said, obsolescence. But there are a lot of things that push you to make the decision that we have to do this. But what are you trying to accomplish? What is the goal you're trying to accomplish, or what is the problem you're trying to solve? If you do not have a very clear understanding of one or both of those things, you're gonna end up struggling throughout the entire thing, because lack of clarity around what you're trying to accomplish is the number one contributor to scope creep, to budget blowing, to people not having conflict because they think that they're right, and this is the most important reason why we're doing this, but this other part of the team says no, this is why we're doing it. And so that is probably the single biggest thing I've seen, and that comes down to a combination of leadership and the project team being able to come up with what they really want to do, and then working with their communications and change management people to effectively communicate that in a way that resonates with everybody on the team, so everyone's pulling in the same direction.
And they know the why is the mission. If you step back to your career within the service of the country and mission, and speaking on their behalf, and I'm sure that comes in. If everyone's aligned in the mission, they know what they're there for, they know what they signed up for. It's easy to fall behind it, but if not everyone's aligned, there's not that clear mission. What's our North Star? And I think I've talked about that on past pods. Is what is the North Star? I do a lot of coaching, have over the last couple of years with the Honor Foundation, a lot of ex-special forces, and all the guys I've spoken to, the team, they all have the North Star. They're all on the same page. They all get it, and that's what makes them successful. Whether it's in business, in a future life, or it's in service of others in the country, and doing some incredible things. So,
Can I have a funny story, just a really short one?
Yeah.
When I joined the Air Force, it was right in 2000. So I mean, right out of school, doing a PR degree. and got into the Air Force, was doing this. And within a year, 9/11 hit, right? Massive change in everything. All of a sudden, communications responsibility was like frontmost in everybody's mind. I was the person out in front of the gate giving the updates to the news media about what was going on. Yeah, really, really amazing how overnight we became really important. I was able to check in with some of my friends who I'd gone to school with, who were now in big advertising and PR firms and things like that. And overnight, I had a sense of purpose behind what I was doing that made my job important. Whereas almost everybody else out there who had my job or who went through my school did not have a clue what they were doing, because all of a sudden they just didn't seem to matter anymore. Oh, I'm just an advertising person for Coke or for shoes or for whatever. And it's sort of like, this isn't important anymore. We're at war. So you're absolutely right. Being able to have that sense of purpose, and it doesn't obviously have to be as imperative or as grievous perhaps as that, but every organization should have a reason for why they're doing what they're doing. And it should be something that people can actually say. You should be able to go to somebody who's a new hire, who's been on the job for a couple of weeks, and say, why are we here? What are we trying to do here as a company? And they should be able to answer. And if they can't, then you've got big problems, because I guarantee any initiative you undertake, you're going to have problems. You're going to struggle.
In these big projects, there's just bound to be times where there's ambiguity. So if you don't have the North Star, then you're essentially rudderless, right? And it's just, inefficient, can go the wrong direction. So just having that clarity is super important. The other thing,
away with it. You could get away with it when things are just kind of day-to-day normal standard ops. But when you're in a crisis, or when you end up with competing priorities and restricted resources, that's when it really starts showing up.
Yeah. And would you even say that, like, through the various stages, you should have defined success criteria as well, right? For whether it's, milestone 1 or milestone 10, it has to be even more than just that end product goal.
Yes, but it's much more difficult to even define those success criteria if you don't know what you're trying to accomplish in general.
Yep. Yeah, absolutely. Makes sense. All right. So we've all heard of horror stories of ERP projects gone wrong. So, and I know we've touched on some of the reasons why they go wrong, but we have a funny question for you. So if your ERP implementation horror story was a movie, what would the title be?
Mission Impossible. Honestly, most of them that start going down that path and become horror stories, it really is just so many things have lined up to be working against them. Leadership is trying to force something on people, but not giving them the time and the resources to be able to actually effectively execute. You have people who are not committed because they're being pulled in 100 different directions, or because the culture doesn't reward them for the extra work that they're doing, or they've been down this road before and they're like, this is never going to happen, so why bother? I mean, there's a lot of things that come into play. So I would say Mission Impossible is probably the name of the movie that way. However, they're not all like that. I'm on a project right now that I would actually call Mission Possible, because literally we have a really strong group of people who all want the change, which is rare, as you know. And we're only a month delayed, and for very, very good reason, and still under budget. I mean, this is like unheard of. It's kind of this unicorn project out there. So you can have it go both ways. Again, it's a matter of how well did the organization prepare themselves and their people, and how dedicated are they, because they got to put their money where their mouth is on these things.
And you can't have anybody up at the top in leadership being that person, like you mentioned before, that says, oh, well, I've seen this before and it's not going to be successful, so I'm just going to wait it out, right? Because you can't have influencers in the organization, be that.
You can. I've seen it.
Well, you don't want it.
You've got all these little worker bees who are out to prove them wrong. But it does make it a whole lot harder.
Okay, great. So, in the world of ERP, there's obviously something always new to learn, right? Because the software just keeps evolving. You have more tools today than you had yesterday. What's a piece of advice you'd give to someone who's just starting out in ERP implementations? And what's one thing that you wish somebody had warned you about?
Oh, do it. I'm just kidding. Bad advice. You're going to have to do it. You can't get away without doing these things these days. They just can't. Everybody needs to keep up with technology in order to remain competitive. So I'd say, obviously, going back to what I'd said earlier, which is knowing what you're trying to accomplish is number one. I wish somebody had told me when I was starting out, how important it is to listen to the people who are in the trenches, who work with the tools day in and day out. Too often you have management, whether it's mid-management or senior management, executive level management, who are really pushing this. They're the people behind it. They're the driving force. They're the ones coming up with all the answers, making all the decisions. They are so far removed from the work that's actually being done that sometimes they're not making great decisions. Sometimes they're doing their best, but they're representing things in a way that is not realistic. And I think when it comes to being a good project manager, change manager, or just being a part of the project team, you have to listen to the people who are actually using the tools. They know best what the problems are, what the obstacles are, what the barriers are, what the pain points are. And then our job is to be their advocate at those decision-making sessions to the leaders when the leaders are starting to make those decisions, because most of the time, those people do not feel empowered to speak on their own behalf. And if they speak to their manager, who then has to speak to their manager, who has to speak to their manager. And it's this telephone game going up that all of a sudden the leadership gets some message that is completely not what was being sent to begin with. So when you're in that kind of bridging kind of a role, your job is to hear those things, seek them out, listen, and represent and be an advocate for those when and where you can, because that's what's going to make the project successful.
Absolutely. Yeah. Great answer. Yeah. They're stakeholders too, right? And ultimately they're the ones doing it. And the last thing you ever want,
it won't make it happen.
Right. You don't want turnover in that area either. I mean, that's just going to disrupt your timeline even more.
Though Jared might be okay with that because it'd give him more business.
So it's keeping on time, it's on budget as much as can, and setting expectations, right? That's the communication piece within it, which is really important. And our company just in the last year did a more of a billing implementation, and I wasn't in the weeds and the thick of things, but usage, our clients or our customer base uses it, or our internal team uses it to help automate. And so looking at that, but I thought we did a pretty good job, but it was communicated up front. Hey, our team's going to be dedicated to this. There's going to be some challenges. We're spending extra time in hypercare because we want to make sure that it's as smooth as possible. We're going to over communicate, but it still pulls your time, even just like people are, and I knew this, and I'm like, I'm excited about it. But like you said, coming back to the mission, why are we doing this? If I've got to sit through a training video, I'm like, I don't really want to do this, but I got to remember the why behind it. And so coming back to that, it is like a movie and a story. There's the beginning. Sometimes there's the quiet period where nothing happens. And at the end, it's like this, we've talked to this a year ago, but now it's like go live. It's all the action, fighting and the Mission Impossible, like all the action scene. And then at the end, hopefully it calms down. And then guess what happens? There's a Mission Impossible 2, right? That comes
exactly.
Yeah. There's the next module, right, Jared?
Exactly. Sometimes we have some years in between, but sometimes they're back to back. Depends.
And you can just hope that the sequel's sort of as good as the original, right?
Yeah. Hopefully the main characters, stay involved, right? That always helps.
Exactly.
Great. All right. So last question here. So Jared and I like to talk about buzzword bingo a lot, just because we just hear and see these things a lot, and in our space. So let's play ERP bingo. What are some of the most overused buzzwords or phrases you hear during these projects, and which one makes you roll your eyes the hardest?
Probably like ROI, because again, if they don't know what they're trying to accomplish, there's no way to measure that. And people don't generally take the time to sit down and kind of measure baseline. And if you don't have a baseline, you can never actually get what the difference is, the delta is at the end. So ROI is probably one of the ones that makes me go, oh, here we go again. They don't know what they're talking about.
It's just in the wind. Like, yeah, theoretically this should, make us money, but we have no way of really measuring it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And then you spend a ton of time and a ton of money putting this thing into place, and you have absolutely no idea if you accomplished what your goal was, you solved the problems you were out to solve, and did you save money? Did you cost yourself more money? Did you make processes easier? Did you more complicate them? Yeah.
What's the timeline to break even?
Mm-hmm.
Who knows, right?
Exactly.
Yeah, that's a good one. And Jared had a few other good ones on here that we just hear all the time. Streamline is just a word that is we're always streamlining things.
Oh, absolutely. And yet
biggest,
somehow not.
we're hearing a lot. We're going to the cloud. We're going to the cloud.
Oh,
Everything's going to be better in the cloud. And
agile.
yeah, so going to be agility, agile, low hanging fruits. Let's find the easiest low hanging fruits, show value immediately, and then we'll be able to expand, the footprint. And again, all these make sense. It just there's a
yeah. If you were to have GPT make you a marketing campaign around this, we'd get all of those words.
100%. Automation too.
Always automating. Awesome. All right. Well, thanks, DJ. This was great. Really, really appreciate us interviewing you and giving us all these great answers. I know our listeners will appreciate it. So moving on to what's happening, what's coming up next in San Diego, Jared?
A couple of days ago about IT unicorn companies in San Diego by AITP, but I think that actually that was this week, so we just missed it. But a great calendar that gives a weekly snapshot. One of my friend, Jonah Peak, put out the Social Coyote. Might have mentioned it before, but he's constantly iterated and improved and getting people together within the tech ecosystem. It's a great spot to check out and sign up for it. It's thesocialcoyote.com. Great spot to keep you posted on what's happening here locally. And then there is this Top Tech San Diego event, mentioned it earlier. It is coming up soon, September 26th. So that's recognizing top technology leaders here locally. A lot of other cities do offer this event as well. So, but San Diego's is coming up in about 2 months.
Thank you, Jared. All right. So we just have one last question for you, DJ, just to wrap this up. For somebody wanting to level up their change management toolkit, what do you recommend they study, train on, or practice?
The closest thing to a silver bullet is communication. So brush up on your comm skills. And it's not just writing emails or talking to people. It really is more around the ways to approach people. Everybody has their communication preferences. Some people like things just short and sweet. Some people want all the details and they want you to show all the facts and figures and research. And finding ways that you can effectively communicate to broad audiences of people that will actually meet everybody's needs is really probably pretty imperative for successful change management. So I'd say that's where I would start, is brush up on those comm skills.
We've talked about DJ influencing and how do you influence someone, whether it's at the C-suite or that may be, very decisive on a direction, and having them be a bit more open-minded or consider different options. And I think you do a good job of that, of just understanding, asking, and by your thoughtful questions, to have them think about it from that other side, because you might have heard from a user, a totally different story of what maybe the direction of the project or maybe some of where they were going. So,
and knowing what that person actually cares about really helps. So doing a little research on who you're talking to before you go into some of those kind of challenging conversations, because then you can actually frame the entire conversation in a way so you can show them what they're going to get out of it. Most people really want to know what's in it for me. And so if you could do that in your comms, you're way more likely to actually successfully influence.
One last question. Any words of advice for a company about to embark on an ERP project?
Invest in your project. It is not going to be cheap. It is not going to be easy. So give your people the time and the space to actually work on the project. Get people involved who are experts in what you need them to do, so that you're not running around asking somebody who's never done managed a project, to be the project manager for something that's really critical and important for your organization. And make sure you've got your priorities straight, because conflicting priorities kill projects and extend projects. And too often times we're like, we have to do this, but we also have to do all these other things. And it's like, well, which do you want me not to do? And that's a tough question, because sometimes there's no good answer. But if it's that important to your business and you're about to spend the amount of time and money that these things actually take, you really ought to make sure that it is a priority and that you're carving out the time and the resources for people to do it right.
Well said. Well, thank you so much, DJ. Great speaking with you. Hopefully we get a chance to do this again. Thanks everybody for listening. If you have any topics you want us to cover in the future, please let us know in the comments. DJ and Jared, again, thank you for your time, and we'll talk soon.
Thank you, John. Thank you, DJ.